Today's session is in the file, and we're looking at how brand and product design collaborate where components meet creativity. I'm really excited for this one. We don't normally do a brand stint on our live stream, so I can't wait to see what the HotJar team have prepared for us. We do have the team from HotJar. There's actually 4 of them speaking today, and they've got some awesome work to show us. I saw a little sneak peek earlier. I can't wait for them to show you all as well. So I'm going to hand it over to them. Enjoy, everybody.
Thank you very much for the intro, Louis, and welcome everybody to our talk about collaboration between HotJar's brand and product design teams. I hope you're all having a nice lunch break, or I guess I've seen some people from all over the world, so it might be your breakfast or your dinner. That's also fantastic. Let me share my screen. And can I get a thumbs up if you can see the screen nicely? Thumbs up. Thank you very much. So today from HotJar, we have Ilana. She's a product designer on our acquisition squad, and she's in charge of the site design system. We have Adria, our senior brand operations manager, who is now PM on our discovery squad, and a bit more on what that is later. We have Eddie, product design lead and in charge of our product design system, and myself, Christian, the brand lead at HotJar. Adria and I will take you through the presentation, and Ilana and Eddie will be there to answer any questions you might have at the very end. I'll promise that I'll dive into the file, as the session is called, as soon as we can. But before we do, we want to share a little bit of a story of what HotJar is and what we do, so you have a bit more context. And in case you don't know, HotJar gives you a set of tools, including site recordings, surveys, incoming feedback, and heat maps to show you how your users navigate your site, where they click, and also where they get stuck if maybe the experience isn't up to par just yet. So you can learn from your users in real time, and you can spot bugs just like this one very quickly. You can easily verify your assumptions with real-time feedback tools, and you can filter your users by your most important cohorts to group learnings into something we like to call a product experience insight. And this way you can easily collaborate with your teams on updates, get buy-in from stakeholders faster, avoiding any hippos along the way, hopefully, and in the end, connect the dots between what's happening on your site and why it's happening to, in the end, create a product that your users and any prospect will love. And just a little bit more about HotJar as a company. We're fully remote, and we have been since 2014. We're currently 233 people in 41 countries across the globe. And we've always been remote. Oop, that's too far. Not time for share yet. There we are. Where we've always been remote, even before the pandemic hit. So we have a lot of tools and tricks on how to stay in touch, even though a lot of our team hasn't seen each other in person just yet. So if you want to learn more about that, you can visit our blog. And of course, we have a careers page as well. But let's get to the important stuff. What I want to tell you to preface the story a little bit is that we rebranded in Q1 of 2021, and why we've decided that it's time for a rebrand. And this really goes back to feedback we've received from our core customer segment on how they felt about the HotJar brand. And sadly, a good chunk of them thought it wasn't really appealing to them and it wasn't made for them, or it just didn't have any feelings about it at all, which as a brand is probably the worst thing that you can have anybody feel. So this is what it looked like then. And this led us really to HotJar's first proper update and branding. And that all happened quite quickly, I should add. We've taken 3 months to come up with the new logo, the new look and feel, and another 3 months to design the site and get it live. We've talked to thousands of people, thousands of customers and prospects to verify what we've done. And we've had fantastic help from our agency How & How, based in Lisbon. Shout out to them if you're watching, both on the branding and the website relaunch to turn this thing around in only half a year. And internally, something that we stumbled across in the past was that the alignment between brand and product wasn't yet in a place where it probably should be. And so this new brand gave us a bit of a chance to do a do-over and rethink how we can share files, how we can improve communication, and add a ton more ease into the process. Now, you might ask, did we fully succeed? not 100%. I think there's a lot of more room for improvement, but I think we have improved, and we've learned a lot from this process. And today we'll talk about one example where we got to learn and improve. The experience design team has started a new initiative to minimize debt by creating a strong design system throughout our product already on the old design, which made the transition pretty smooth between the old and new design and landed us on this new design within product ahead of schedule. Fantastic. So the site itself was a little bit easier, of course, because we've done it new from scratch. We also have a design system for that. And part of this rebrand was also an overhaul of our illustrations. And with us having to show tools that at times are a bit hard to visualize and hard to grasp, we knew that illustration was something that we had to keep. Diversity was a must, since our old single color line characters looked all kind of like generic white folks. And with all this in mind, let's now talk about how we created this new library and made it accessible both for the brand team and also the product team. And with that, I'd like to pass it on to Adria.
Hello. Well, I'm Adria. Very happy to be here. I'll dive a bit deeper on how we built this illustration library. I'll take you a bit through a journey that we went through, and now it can take any questions. So we created a style, and we had to align with all the freelance artists with that style. And we had over 230 illustrations to redo in just over a 6-week turnaround. That's when we had like the deadline for the websites to go live. We were able to work with the incredible Mike Oroden on the basic structure and look and feel. He also helped us develop the basic grid to create our characters, like you're seeing, and use our trace line in illustration with a focus on diversity that we didn't have before. This high turnaround that we needed got us questioning how can we best create illustrations within the same style, within the deadline that we had for the launch. And we did some approx maths on the time needed for each illustration and hired 4 freelance illustrators to help us whip them out on time. This required a bit extra help from Mike again, building some great guidelines and being available for questions on the first days. I think now I'll be sharing the file. So in the file, let me share my screen. Obviously I need to find it. Yes. Now I stopped seeing you. One sec, I'll figure it out. Can you still see the screen? Yes, I can see everything now. Perfect. Sorry about the hiccup. Ready. Hopefully you're seeing the illustrations by themes on the Figma. So this is one of the things that we did. We wanted to create those illustrations in a smart way. So investing the same time in one illustration that got many thousands of views on the homepage, for example, on one of our top guides, that versus one that got only hundreds, if that many, did not seem efficient to us. So we put together an audit board with all illustrations and divided them by high impact ones, we could say, and reusable ones. And these last ones were then grouped around shared themes like you are seeing now, and that we could repurpose around. So for example, we mentioned tools in different sections of our site, meaning different parts of our different products that we have or different tools that we use. I wanted to slightly tweak one same illustration that could appear in different sections and mean a bit different things when you see it in the other contexts. So that in terms of production time means that we saved a lot of time. We were creating a high value, like we were saying, illustration in about 3 hours time, if that's of interest, and that we could create 6 to 8 reusable illustrations like you were seeing now. Some of them, we have a bit of note here below, in about 30 minutes. So it's 4 hours, but we were creating 8. So it's like 30 minutes for illustrations. And that allowed us to develop all the illustrations that we needed on time. And it was a great angle to tackle it. But now let me share some obstacles that we have. I'm moving to the board just to talk about this. So what you're seeing now, it's some of the illustrations that Mike created first. So we based the rest. You're not seeing everything, but yeah, zooming. Hopefully no one gets dizzy here. Sorry about that. So let's talk about obstacles in creating this. Firstly, most illustrators that we talk to work in Illustrator. So they're used to it. It's their daily bread, and they know how to use it. So asking them to create it or transfer to Figma wasn't really working it for either side. However, since both our brand and product teams use Figma, we knew and we wanted them to be in Figma anyway. So we increase accessibility and we integrate with our natural workflow. So that made sense and seems like, okay, it's decided, right? Wrong. So I prepared something here on the file. This is not the actual library, but just it's not slides, but I wanted to tell you what happened. So basically our illustrations, because of the style that we have, broke when we imported them into Figma. They lost the masks and the gradients, as you're seeing on the screen, hopefully. I can zoom a bit more if that's too small. And it was not funny. It is funny today, though, kind of. But then it was a bit stressing. And we talked with people from Figma. We were trying to find a solution with them. I don't think with this time we found it with them. Luckily, one of the illustrators that we were working with, Santiago Wardak, saying hi if you're around, was making the switch to create illustrations from Figma. And his expertise here was key. He dug deep for days, exporting, re-importing with slight changes in how to build different illustrations to find out that instead of using, very specific, but instead of using clipping masks with one single gradient across the whole illustration, we could create compound paths with gradients in them, and the importing them into Figma would work fine, as long as we just saved as the file rather than exporting screens from Illustrator. Yeah, probably they're adding some extra layers on when you export things, but that was interesting. So then we updated our guidelines so everyone followed the same exporting and the building of the illustrations. And then luckily we did this pretty at the start, so we only had like 25-ish, maybe Santiago disagrees, but 25-ish, 30 illustrations to rework from what we had before to this new building style, building way. It was the same style though. So this was a great moment in this roller coaster ride, but there's more. So switching here so I can explain what happened then. So Figma came to the rescue. I feel this was a huge fail, actually, from my side to not have tested this before. But despite, you could see the illustrations just fine on our boards, and it linked greatly to Zero Height. We could have the library there. We were very happy when we exported those illustrations as SVGs. Boom. You lost all gradients and you lost all fields, and it really did not look nice. Again, it was a bit of a bummer. We tried again to rework all the illustrations desperately. Nothing would work, and as a last resort, I wrote again to Figma, and that was amazing. Within a couple of days, I was talking with some developers, and they fixed it magically. The export was fixed. We could then export SVGs, and everything was ready for being deployed as a library. So that was a great moment. This meant that yes, we could have the library in Zero Height, which was key for us, and we could keep working with Figma with SVGs, etc. So it all was solved, and that was some of the pains that we encountered on the way. If you have more questions, I'm happy to talk about it later. And some other things that we went through while creating this. So naming structure. We searched for what's the best naming structure to build a library. I think Ilana and myself shared and read many articles and got lost in things that maybe we should not have. But in the end, at least myself, in the end, we came up with 3 different suggestions, put the formulas together on a spreadsheet, and gathered feedback from the teams that would interact the most with that. So that's content, product design, brand design. And the one that worked best for us was this that you're seeing. So we're firstly explaining which web section this is going into, for slides. So when you export, you have like a folder. Then whether we have like a team or person as a character on there, which action they are performing, and the description. You'll see some examples when we dive into the file, but one of them is, for example, best practices. That's the section on our site. Team high-fiving on a customer journey, or product insights, person analyzing product behavior. And then, so if a product designer or brand designer is looking for a person illustration, they can just type person and they can swipe on the library right from the assets panel, and that's fine. What else we have now? I want to take you through the three different sections that we have on the library. Hopefully you'll see this very small now. So there's 3 sections: right, middle, and left, middle, and right. Zooming in into the left one, and this is the part of the just easy one, the freelance drop-off zone. So we created this so all the 4 freelancers that we had could just jump into Figma and very clearly see where they needed to drop things. They basically come here, drop the SVGs in Figma, any other original files, if they're working on other programs, Illustrator or whatever, they just open this folder on Google Drive and they drop it there. There's a drop zone folder. And then it comes to us in the brand team, and me in the brand ops team. What we do, actually, I think I can do that with you right now. So one of the things that we do first is renaming, right? So you have received this illustration, the Illustrator wrote the name that they thought it was most fit to it. But here we know that it's the product insights section of the website. And then this is a person, it's not a team. And we know that is a bit subjective, we know, but since it's one person when they're doing it, it's kind of consistent. So it's a person, and we would say it's kind of balancing qual and quant, different insights. So once we have that, you get this, move it across to the right column. I don't know if you're ever really interested in this, but yeah, I'm finishing. Obviously, then convert it to component, which is wrong shortcut. Sorry about this. Now it's a component, and in the export, we want it in 2x PNG and then SVG. And as soon as we publish the changes, that's ready to use for the product designers, well, or anyone really using the library. Just to check that was fine, we go to, I've ready this file here. Hi, everyone on the product design team that is using this. So we said balancing, right? If we write balancing, we should see this. And we can just put it here. We'll make it super big. They will not be happy, but we'll fix it later. So what else we have? So back to the library. Product illustrators can search from the assets panel that you've seen. They can also swipe around here and have a look. If they don't find what they're looking for, we have like a form that they just complete this form, and we're asking things like, what team are you in? Or where will this illustration appear? What's the deadline for this? What does the audience need to understand? Who's the audience? Things like that, like short brief for us to get it ready for them, right? And yeah, we have a 2 weeks estimate turnover. That's just information. What else do we have? Variants, very interesting. So I'm sharing, for example, this illustration here. Oops, zooming issues. So one of the first things that we realized while working with product designers was that they use illustrations on our off-white product background. And so the current illustrations that we had needed to have a transparent background variant. This brought obvious changes to our current illustrations, since some already had white parts that would disappear. Like you see, obviously, that this legs in this illustration, if you just put it transparent, they disappear. So we have to take it through a designer and decide which colors are making the most sense in there. Yeah, this means that creating the transparent variants requires some help, but yeah, then once it is ready, they can just put it into a product real fast. Another thing that we're working with variant, and this is our next step, I would say, is once, so you're seeing here the themes again. We thought like it would be nice to have this as variants and allowing more flexibility with our reusable illustrations. we added different backgrounds first and the icon elements that you see around the illustrations. So there's 4 things around here, for example, as variants. However, we ended up with too many options and would first need an element library so designers know what's available for them, and then after that build their own scene. But this is some work, so we haven't done this yet, and this is some work that we need to do in the coming months. And I think that was all me talking about the library and within the file. I'm happy to take questions afterwards. Now jumping to you, Christian, to talk about the marketing squads.
Thank you, Adria. So Adria took us through the file and through the juicy bits. Sadly, I'm just going back into my presentation. But there's one more thing that we would like to share with you that we thought might be interesting as part of this conversation. And that's reorganizing our marketing teams into squads. So as we've been talking about improving the communication between brand and product, we've also made a big change in how we communicate and work inside marketing. We used to have these 3 teams. So we used to have customer marketing, brand, and a performance and content team. And from the 1st of January, we've transitioned into 4 cross-functional squads, looking like this. And they're organized by sections of our customer journey. We have the discovery squad, whose objective is raising brand awareness. We have the leap squad, where you leap to creating your account. We have the adopt squad, which increases product usage. And lastly, the adore squad, which increases product retention. And the squads themselves really work like a product team. So they have a PM each. So Adria's now, instead of a brand operations manager, has transitioned very successfully into the Discover PM, Discover Squad PM. And then within each of the squads, we have team members that work without a hierarchy within the squad. So everyone's voice is equal, and the PM comes in to decide what to work on, brainstorm with the team, and also be the voice of the customer, or reminding the team that the voice of the customer should always be heard within the squad. Now, within this, we of course also need some sort of hierarchy to just enable people's growth. So we're also adding chapters on top of the squads. So if the squads go downwards, the chapters go sideways. And for us, that's the creative chapter, where we have designers, video and motion, and social media. Not all of them in every squad, but all of them as part of the chapter. And we also have a performance, content, customer marketing, and data and analytics chapter. Now, why did we do this? And why do you think do we think it might be interesting for you? Our core audience at HotJar are product teams. So by reorganizing the marketing team just like they're set up, we believe we end up thinking similarly, having similar processes, and therefore understanding our customer better to serve them better. And even beyond that, it's helpful for us in building a scalable structure for collaboration, which is at the core of everything we do. And we want to ensure autonomy and career growth of each individual in the team. And we want to remove, lastly, blockers as quickly as we can. We're a product-led company. So we want to ensure we're always very well connected also with our internal product teams. And by working more like them, we're hoping to understand and create synergies with them more as well. And again, we've rolled it out on the 1st, so we don't have a ton of learnings yet. So far, the team's really excited by it. And we're going to look more into into how this goes in the future. We really hope that, especially for design, that it can remove some of the communication blockers between the marketing and the product teams. So fingers crossed that this happens. And we hope that also changes and adjustments like the way we work with our illustration library can do this as well in the future. So that is pretty much all that we have to share with you today. So we hope this was insightful or inspiring, or at least give you a nice soundtrack for your lunch break. So I'd say it's time for questions. Does that sound good? Questions. Oh, one thing, sorry, I forgot. Here's all the incredible people that we worked with. So if you want to reach out to any of them, screenshot the right side. So I'll leave this for another few seconds. 3, 2, 1, and then that's it from my side. I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you very much, everyone.
Perfect. We have tons of questions, and thank you for such a great exploration through your presentation. It was really nice to see that you have thought incredibly detailed about the end-to-end process of illustration, how that feeds into lots of different departments, marketing, product design, using variants, using components, all these things is really nice to see. So there was actually lots of questions around the illustration library and its publicity, I guess. People want to see them. Do you have them open source? Do you have a plan to make them open source? Do you showcase them anywhere else other than your zero height installation?
So we're not quite there yet. We're all about transparency. So we want to make things accessible, but I believe our structure just isn't suited yet for external visitors. You know how these projects that are so essential, as in wrapping this up, sometimes take a bit of time because you have so many chefs in the kitchen, and we're still figuring out how it works. What I would love to do actually is also turn this into an article. So if you keep following us, we'll definitely share when it's public, but give us a few more weeks or months for this.
Sure, sounds good. The next question is about I guess the next stage of illustrations, which is movement, animation, that kind of thing. How do you approach that? What are your thoughts? Any advice on that topic?
Who goes?
So we've already started on it. We did our explainer video with the new illustration style, and we realized the way these illustrations are made doesn't with 100% ease lend itself to animation, because you have complications by bringing in the line movements that you otherwise wouldn't have with normal characters, because you just move the arm and there are two fields and you're good to go. So we're currently exploring how this works. We currently have the video as a video file on the homepage, but we would love to explore more Lottie animations on the site. To be fair, we've just hired our first motion designer and video editor in-house, so that's something we're building out. We're looking for 2 more at the moment. So that's something we want to turn into guidelines, turn onto something very usable. And I completely agree with I think it's a fantastic question, because that's absolutely the next step that we need to be taking. So we've already explored a few things on how to make these line animations more easy, and there is ways to do it. So it might also influence again the way we set up guidelines for these illustrations, because maybe it's a certain radius that works and one that doesn't work, or a size of loops and swirls that works and what doesn't work, or might not work. So that's definitely the next step for us. Sure. In getting that in-house and making it our daily bread.
Right. Just to add on that, we do have Lottie animations on the website, but not on like complete animations per se. It's more assets that we have animations on top of photography and so. But yeah, for the animations, more core animation, more visual animation, as the explainer video we have, as Christian said, I think there's a way to go still.
I suppose that's probably a good lead-on question then about micro interaction versus illustrative animation versus something else in the middle. How does that actually get divided up? Who owns that, and where do those things get placed in those chapters that you're talking about? I'm guessing micro interactions could live with brand or with product. So how do you manage that?
It's really in the element library that we're rolling out, because we started with full illustrations because that's where the biggest need was lying, and that's also the illustration that at first as like empty states and so on that we identified in the product. And now we're going from the big into the more granular things. So I think we've covered the big thing very well. So what we're doing now is we're seeing from which illustration we can take elements, we can take smaller bits and pieces that at the moment we repurpose for our social media posts, for example, and we're repurposing some of them already in product. So now we're getting smaller and smaller, and we're adding animation there. And that's so far the best process that really helped us sort this out.
Got a bunch of questions about the sort of practical Figma side of illustrations, as I'm sure you can imagine there are lots. There's also a few questions about the operational side, so I'll split them up and do the sort of practical side first and then come over to those operational ones. On a very sort of detailed level, you've mentioned that you're using components, variants, which I'm sure has supercharged your workflow, but how are you approaching styles with regards to illustrations? Is that something you want to really heavily bake in, or are you happy for a bit more flexibility with how people are using colors?
I can take this one. So I don't think we're using any styles on the illustrations. I think for the product, we're definitely using styles. During the rebrand, we wanted to give the site design team more like ability to adjust things, make tweaks. So we wanted to separate it. So we focused on making a design language, and there we established the colors that would be cascading throughout everything. And then so the design language has all the colors, and then all the design systems underneath that have all the aliases, right? So the site design system would have the alias for the CTA colors, the product design system would have their own aliases. So I don't think we're using any in the illustrations, but for the rest of the product and the other design systems, I think we are.
Yeah, I presume that there could be a situation where you have 100 more colors that you use in illustrations that you don't necessarily want to cross over with the product team, and making that distinction about what library feeds into what. Do you have separate libraries? Do you have libraries of libraries? And all these sorts of questions are something you're going to end up having to tackle, which is fun. The next question, we've actually had the same question a couple of times, is about line weights, stroke weights, that kind of thing in your illustrations. How are you managing that, and how does that impact the creation and management and rolling out of an illustration?
Hello, taking this one. So we have the illustration libraries guidelines on zero height, and there we specify the line weights for. There's a couple of them. There's one for main characters, and then another weight for secondary things on the illustration. But I think that's all I know about it. Am I missing something on the question though?
Let's say we have an illustration that needs to be used on mobile and web. You may want that thickness to be different across both of those instances. How are you managing that? Is it something that you're actually okay with, that they have the same, or are you looking more like a responsive approach to thicknesses more broadly across the illustrations?
I don't think I have a proper answer. I think we have one while we export it with SVG, and then it's responsive through the CMS that we use. But we're not providing different different line width illustrations for different responsiveness screens.
Do you look at illustrations as being set once for all sizes, or are you going to end up maybe in a situation where an illustration becomes more complex as it gets to a larger device size? Is that something you consider, or are you happy to have a one size for all?
I think we're happy now with one size for all. And as we evolve this, and as we work with maybe more bigger illustrations, or bigger, I don't know, if we have like press releases, or we want to go like in a big illustration on a street sign or whatever, then we might start building that with more details or a different component, I don't know. But for now, for what we need, I think we're at a good start. I think it's enough with that.
Now let's maybe switch track a little bit and talk about the sort of operational side of maintaining this kind of library and this structure. So somebody's had a really great question about whether you've done any user testing on things like illustrations or brand elements, particularly with regards to one type of element versus another. So an illustration versus a photograph. Is that something that you consider? How have you gone about that?
I'm happy to take this one. Cool. So absolutely, yes. We have both looked at talking to customers about it, talking to prospect and existing customers, but we've also taken into consideration two more things. One is the pace and speed of which, and therefore the cost it takes to create assets, and also the suitability for different types of our product. So we have bits and pieces of our product that just don't work in photographs. But we do have an emotional side of our brand as well that might not necessarily work in a very simplified UI. So we have three buckets. We have this illustration bucket that we spoke of today, which is used in things like empty state in our product. We use it exclusively in our guides on our site, and we use it in social media. This is the 3 times that we use these things, these types of more elaborate illustrations. On the other hand, every time we talk more specifically about the product, for example, in a product announcement, we've tested and found that actually simplified UI makes a lot more sense. So where we used to use illustration way back, we've switched to simplified UI because people just want to understand what the interface looks like. They want to know what to expect. It's a bit lower on the funnel, so they're really craving that, seeing the feature rather than the metaphorical edge that an illustration could add. And then when we're talking on the blog, when we're looking at the blog, we use photography. When we're talking about people or emotions, we use photography more. And if that is not possible because it's abstract, we have a very high content output. So we've actually decided not to use illustration on the blog, but instead go for simplified iconography that is in line with the overall look and feel. So we kind of have 3 buckets, and we've tested them. I think I saw in your question, you also asked if there were inclinations to go into 3D. So we've tested what works best, and we've worked very closely with our agency, and we've also seen what works with the branding, what represents the mood and the approach, the empathy and transparency that we want to convey, and this suited best and got the best results. We've done a ton of testing. Like I said earlier, we talked to over 1,000 people at different stages of the creation process and in different depths of the creation process. And that was interviews, it was polls, it was also using Facebook actually to get a feedback and a feel on the logo, on the look and feel, on illustrations and every single element. Because what was really important for us in the rebrand was to not let the loudest voice make the decision, and to remember, and I know this is said so many times, but we are partially not our core audience. We need to appeal to our core audience, and the only way to do that is to speak with them. And so that's why we wanted to put the voice of the customer in the center of it. And it's not always easy to read, and of course there's other influences in the room, but I think it was a really good learning for us and a really great learning for the team to go through this process.
Right, I love that approach. Kind of related is that you've been talking about the sort of external validation of the decisions that you want to make. How do we look at it from an internal perspective to make sure that the design team are actually using the illustrations that you're making in the way that was intended and not destroying the beautiful work that you're producing?
Mm. So, I mean, initially in the rebrand process, that was another question. So I might just briefly slot that in here. But we were wondering, what should the internal voice actually be in a rebrand process? And we've decided that the role of our internal team is to raise red flags. The role of the internal team is to be like, hey, I think this completely goes against this design, this look and feel, this approach to brand or to product goes against what we believe we stand for. So there is the safety net, and there is the value and importance of the internal voice, but with the understanding of the external voice being more important, because that's who we're catering to. In this process, how do we internally make sure that these things work, these illustrations look great and they represent what we stand for? That's an open communication. So we are very big on collaboration, and we're very big on transparent and direct communication. So we have channels where we share things, where brand can look at what product is doing. We have meetings where we talk to each other about these things. We have non-work related groups that take care of the interpersonal things that are happening between product and brand, and they talk about things like sharing, they talk about things like celebrating even, and I think that's really key to bringing these voices together. Also, I'm super excited that we're going to meet in person as a company in June. So I think that also helps with exchange. We don't want to rely on that because I think we work really well remote, but it changes the mood, and I'm really excited about it. So yeah, one thing, for every new person that joins the company, we send a book called Radical Candor to everybody to really manifest and kind of have a common language around communication and around giving feedback. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, great. And also linked to this as well is the offline version of these illustrations. How do you approach, or maybe you don't, things like print for these illustrations with complex gradients and all that sort of thing? Technically, is there a translation layer between that?
Not yet. Let's see what happens this year. Really looking forward to bringing them into the real world.
Great. And got another question in kind of on the operational management side of it, about the Discover, Leap, Adopt, Adore model that you've taken on board, which I think is fantastic, and haven't really seen any brand teams approach it like this, which is great to see. And they would love to know just a bit of advice. How would you advise another team to employ this kind of model on their team if there's maybe some restriction or just not necessarily that look at the brand team as a structured methodology in the one that you produced?
I would say, see how you can put the customer first. How can you put the customer at the core of your operation? And then if you think outside the box, like a path in the way, I think will show itself to you. When we first talked about it, in all honesty, we're like, this is really stupid. This will never work. We had 3 options that we looked at within the marketing team, and we always defaulted back to the safe one. We were always like, oh, we just slightly need to structure. We need to change, restructure. We just need to add a lead here and there, break things up differently. But then all of a sudden there came that point where I was like, wait, actually, no, we actually need to clean the table, throw everything off that we know, and just go for it. And then it was about transparency within the team. Again, it boils down to transparency. So putting your customer first is the number 1, and then number 2 is transparency. Talk about the issues that you're having as you roll it out. Talk about why you're doing it. Talk about what you want from it, because there's things that don't work. We've had, in all honesty, we work in sprints. We finished our first 2 weeks of our first sprint, and it was great. But now the second one, we're actually struggling a little bit with it. And I think it's fair because it's completely new. We're onboarding new people as we're having this new structure go live, and we're learning as we go. So just keep communicating with each other, keep being transparent, and keep sharing the learnings that you have, because it's a big undertaking and it can fail. So keeping that communication open, I think, is just really important, and have fun along the way. I think there's a lot of things that we can do now that we're liberated from, that are just really exciting and really fun. And don't forget this, and don't forget celebrating the successes.
Right. I'm seeing a very clear link to the radical candor line here between how you approach just, I guess, team structure and enjoyment within the business. Related to that is the different chapters that you do have. How do you avoid silos, avoid those communication blockers that are naturally going to occur with different people with different responsibilities? How do you jump through those hurdles, or over them, I guess?
Sorry, I'm going to take this again, I guess. I'm talking a lot. So the core work happens in the squads. And within the squads, there's no hierarchy. Everyone has an equal share, and everyone works towards the same goals. The annual goals and the quarterly goals, they're set, they're clear, and everyone's aligned on them. How to reach these goals is in every squad's hands. And so when you look at the chapters, this is really about sharing the day-to-day work, sharing the learnings, and sharing how you work within your chapter. So this is where all the designers come together and show the work. They show the work that they've done. So we have transparency. However, this shouldn't really influence the day-to-day of the squad. It can influence a change that we make in the future, but it shouldn't in any way tint the process within the squad. So it's kind of, in my eyes, it's the opposite of a silo, but maybe there's something I'm not seeing, because, or maybe I haven't explained it very well just yet, because the silo of the, if you want to call it the like grouping of one profession, is actually not really influencing the day-to-day. Maybe the silo could happen in the squad, because you're focusing only on one part of the customer journey. But this is also why we're looking at metrics in the greater picture, why we're connecting also as a chapter, why we have chapter leads that also look at the strategy, and why we have our VP marketing who helps us with the bigger picture. But I think it's really crucial now that there's a clear ownership of certain metrics that relate to certain parts of the customer funnel. And it removes for us so many roadblocks that we had between, for example, if we had a performance marketing team coming up with an idea for a Facebook ad campaign, a video campaign, let's say, and them just briefing the design team, and then the design team coming up with the solution to this problem. I think sometimes you don't do your best work, because you're working off a checklist. You just you're working off a checklist, and you're working on somebody else's idea. Now, by bringing these things together in a certain part of the customer funnel, I think you're eliminating these roadblocks. And that's what we're already seeing, people rethinking and coming up with ideas that were much greater than the ones before.
Right. Well, just two more questions, and we'll link it back to the sort of practical illustration side, just to finish. And so the first one is about the structure of illustrations and them being effectively a stage that you're presenting with each scene. Do you ever take pieces of illustrations out and use those in other areas across the product, marketing, materials, that kind of thing?
That has happened, but I mean, taking into consideration that we finished the illustration library end of November, December is kind of a semi-dead month. We haven't done much, but I've seen parts of illustrations now and then here in a social media asset or something. So I think this will happen more and more.
Right.
And just to add, they're made and set up for single elements to be used, so we can very easily extract the light bulb when we need it. We can extract like a thumbs up from an illustration. We don't chop the characters because then I think it's just a new illustration where you need to request something new. But especially these elements that Adria was mentioning that we want to extract as single pieces, we're already doing that now, and it works really well.
Right. And on the rebrand to illustration life cycle that you went through, did the logo come first or did the illustration style come first, and which one informed the other, or did they naturally land together in a perfect world?
That's such an interesting, we've had really good questions, but that's a good one because I actually have to go back and think about it. I think actually the illustrations came first and then we finalized the logo at the end. What came first was the idea, the line and the orbs. So our trace line that you see throughout the design and the orbs, which are kind of these like round gradients, which represent our heat maps and our recording tools, that came really early. And that informed the illustrations. Actually, I think the logo might have come last because we tweaked it often.
Great. I think that's a really nice space for us to wrap up. Thank you to the HotJar team for your incredible insights and also a really lovely take on how to actually operationalize brand, product, the interplay, marketing, all these different things with different moving parts and different responsibilities and different KPIs all working together in a really nice system. That was amazing. Thanks again. And thanks everybody for coming.